Hello, Culture Matters podcast. You are in for a treat today. Here's a quote before I introduce our guest. Learn what is to be taken seriously and laugh at the rest. Herman Hesse. Our guest today, a great friend of the Culture Matters podcast, kin in a great sense of Culture Matters and the Culture Matters podcast. They have been in the business that they're in over 40 years of wisdom and experience, a master at sales, relationship building. I've watched them become best friends with strangers in the blink of an eye. I admire them greatly. They're actually my father-in-law of the love of my life. And if you don't know Jenna Silverman on the show, you're not paying attention, or we don't like you. Our guest today is Jerry Silverman, founder of J&R Group, former teacher, and one hell of a guy. Thanks for finally coming on the Culture Matters podcast. I got a million questions.
Well, thank you. I'm honored. And by the way, my best accomplishment actually is the two daughters that Cindy and I have, my wife, and Jenna is our younger daughter who is married to you. So
Yes.
you're my only son.
Well, I feel like there's a Bible verse in there. Um, yeah, no, and yeah, it's a gift to have you on. And for those that listen to the show, they're blessed every day with your daughter's spirit and your spirit. So we're going to learn a bit about that today. Of course, I had to pick this first quote, learn what is to be taken seriously and laugh at the rest, because you've always been a Herman Hesse fan. You got me into him. But I'd like to learn about, so you were a teacher at first. Now, would you say that that was something that came naturally to you, teaching? Because and I'm asking because you think the second question that would be, do you think there's a relationship with teaching and sales? So, but the first question is, was teaching something that came naturally to you?
It did not come naturally to me. It was very difficult when I first started. And I did it for 9 years. I taught elementary school, and I taught in a school that went from kindergarten to eighth grade. So I first started teaching sixth grade. I had a self-contained classroom where I taught, where the kids just went to gym and art and things and music, but I had them the rest of the day. But after a couple of years, they made the sixth, seventh, and eighth grade like a junior high, and I ended up teaching science. I had a homeroom and I taught science for about 3 years in that same school, which was fine. I liked it.
What type of wait, was that still sixth grade?
Uh, well, my homeroom was sixth grade, but I taught sixth, seventh, and eighth graders. And the cool part about that was that I had all of these kids for sixth grade, and then seventh grade, and then eighth grade. So by the time they got to eighth grade, we knew each other very well.
What was it like to see them grow up?
That was great. My first teaching experience was in South Philadelphia, and I had a class. I had kids that were very diverse. I had African Americans. I had Irish, Italian, Puerto Rican, Vietnamese, and so it was a real melting pot, and I loved it. And the kids got along great, and it was a great experience.
What did you learn about yourself then that you think maybe later in your career even came in handy?
Um, I always tell people that I think my greatest talent is that I get along with people, that I can pretty much get along with anyone. And I think that comes from my background and the different jobs that I had, the part-time jobs that I had when I was in high school and college, and where, I had jobs where I met all different types of people from all different classes, um, and different religions, different races. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed doing it, and it was a real learning experience.
Yeah, what's your advice to someone listening this that has a hard time getting along with different people?
um, I guess it would be to chill, you know, and it would also be to listen more. I think when you listen, you get to know someone. And I always, I mean, when I was in high school, I wanted to be a journalist. I was in my senior year of high school, I was the editor of my high school paper. And, in journalism, you really have permission to be nosy and to find out about people. And I love that. And I still do it. I mean, if I go to a restaurant or wherever I am, I'm looking at people and I'm sort of sizing them up and I'm in my mind saying, oh, this guy must be, an executive, or this guy must be this or that. And I love, I just love people. And that's been a great asset for me.
Were you curious, like young, or did that develop later as a consequence of the
No, I was always
journalism? Or
curious. I was always interested in meeting new people, getting along with people, and that's my talent. Other than that, I don't know what else I would do.
how important is that? Has that been in your career building relationships with customers? Because you've had customer relationships for an admirable
Yes,
amount of time.
yes. I have a lot of long-term relationships with my customers, and I think of them not only as customers but as friends. And um, the company that I worked for last, before I went into my own business, and I was there for 2 months short of 20 years,
Wow.
um, always stressed relationships. It was not a price driven company. And what I mean by that is we were never the lowest price. So you needed to have a relationship with people in order for them to see your worth, what you could do for them aside from the pricing. Because in sales, it's not just about price.
Wow.
So,
And do you remember the first month that you were in the industry? Was that 82,
yes,
81?
82, 1982. I went to work. Well, I left teaching, and at that time, my mother was a bookkeeper for a direct mail company, and it was a small company, and the owner of the company was the only one that was involved in selling, and he was looking for an outside salesperson, and my mother mentioned me to him and told him that I was interested in changing my career. And I interviewed with him, and he gave me the job, and I really loved it, and I was doing very well. And he asked me, he asked me. I went to work for him the beginning of July, and in November, he asked me to slow down and not bring in as much business as I was bringing in, because in the direct mail business, it's extremely time sensitive. And if you're late on something, it's probably a real detriment to the customer. So when he said that to me, I was sort of surprised, because I really wasn't even making my draw at that time. And I asked him if he was willing to expand and add more equipment and more employees. And he said no, he didn't want to do that. And right at that time, I had a customer, a big insurance company called Cigna in Philadelphia. And I was doing some direct mail for them. They called me in for a meeting, and they asked me, they told me that they needed to send a 3-ring binder to their sales force. And I told them the 3-ring binder was too thick to mail, so they needed to put it in a box.
Ah,
And at that point, Cindy, my wife, grew up with a guy's wife who owned a box company, corrugated box company. So I went to him with the project. He asked me if I was happy doing what I was doing. And I said, well, I'm a little bit concerned. And he said, come to work for me, which is what I did. And that's how I started in the box business.
And what is the box business for those that haven't, that maybe it's subtly influencing their life, but right, they take it for granted, right? I'm not thinking about.
Well, first of all, there are a lot of different kinds of boxes and a lot of different kinds of packaging. And I've been involved in a number of different types of packaging because the last company that I worked for, and even in my own business, there are plastic folding boxes, flexible plastic folding boxes that you see in the cosmetic industry, for instance. It shows the product because it's transparent, and a lot of businesses like to use that type of packaging. There are folding boxes, which are like toothpaste boxes, soap boxes, the thin, the thin board. And then there's corrugated boxes, which has 3 layers to it: the outside liner, the medium, and the inside liner. And that's used for shipping. And it's easy for me to describe it these days because all I have to do is say Amazon boxes, and people know. So yeah, so there's all different types of packaging around. And I happened to work for a corrugated box company. And then when I got my next job after 5 years, it was a much larger company that had different types of packaging, and I enjoyed that. And I became the national account manager. So I did some traveling, went all over the country, and that was great too.
What did you learn in that time?
You learn all the time. You're always learning. And what I learned was that I was a pretty good sales guy. I learned that as I was getting older, the play Death of a Salesman always resonated with me. Yeah. And I always thought to myself, at a certain age, no matter how well I do, they're going to tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, you've done a great job for us. And what happened was that sort of like the play, the owner brought his son into the business. The son really didn't know a lot about the packaging business, but he immediately got the big office and became my boss, or one of my bosses. And that was when I decided to make the move. I was 58 years old when I did it, and it was pretty scary. But it worked out. It was the best thing I ever did, actually.
For our listeners that they want to make a move, but what are the things that goes through someone's mind at that time, right?
Well, the main thing is, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to support my family, which I had been doing very well for a number of years,
Yeah, thanks for that, by the way.
I'm sorry.
I said thanks for that, by the way.
Yeah. And I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's great.
I'm trying to remember.
Wow. Because many of our listeners are listening to this podcast, the podcasts, for the very purpose of, whether they realize or not, to get confidence to do something next.
Yeah.
Something new.
Well, I'll tell you what, it was scary, but my wife was so supportive, and our kids were really supportive. When I said that I wanted to do that, everyone, all 3 of my family members said, you'll be great. Don't worry about it. You can do it. And that meant a lot to me.
Wow.
And so I took the leap, and it was nerve-wracking in the beginning. And I remember, putting my head on the pillow at night, and thoughts would start to run through my mind. And I somehow was able to just say, hey, you need your sleep. Tomorrow's another day when you can make things happen. Deal with it tomorrow. And that calmed me down. And I happened to do well from the beginning, and that was, very satisfying. And and made it a much easier transition for me.
You know, what advice do you have around just kind of getting things done? Because you're I would say a conscientious person. Like you work, when you're working, you're working. When you're not. Like how do you balance that, or what's worked for you and to be so responsible?
What's worked for me is that um, in sales, I think one of the big mistakes that people make is that they don't keep good enough records of their customers. They don't follow up on things that they need to follow up on. They don't get back to their customers in a timely fashion. And I, it's crazy because I always made it a point to take notes when I was in front of a customer, to then review it when I got home at night, to
Wow.
put down things that I would recommend to a customer, or mark my, at that time there were daytimers, daytimer books
Wow.
to keep your appointments in. There were no computers or iPhones or anything, and so I used to, put things down in my appointment book, saying, next meeting, talk about this, do this, bring up that, whatever. And that's how I formed
Wow.
relationships. So you have to be detail oriented. Although there are sales guys in different industries, I'm sure, that are not detailed oriented, but just magnanimous guys who can just, take customers out to dinner and to ball games and wherever, whatever, play golf,
Yeah.
and that's how they form relationships. And they're not that well versed even in their business. They just don't know that much about it, but they can sell. And there are these guys who just have that natural ability. I don't know that I mean, maybe I have some of that, but I always felt that um, I had to offer customers more than just pricing, more than just a good product. I had to offer them me. I'm here for you. If you have any questions, if you need anything that has to do with packaging or anything else, I'm here for you. Call me. So,
So
and it's
you
worked.
took notes, you reviewed the notes to make
Right.
recommendations, you kept
Right.
records, and you mentioned about getting back to people.
Yes. Very important,
Why?
because I mean, I'm sure you've experienced it, and everybody else in your audience has experienced the times when you've had to call an insurance company, or a doctor or whoever, and you leave a message and they don't get back to you. You know,
It's happened the other day.
it happens all the time, and it's incredible to me how many times it happens, and especially and not to put any industry down, but contractors who do work in your house,
Yeah.
um, they're notorious for just not getting back to you. And I, when somebody calls me back, uh, they've got the job basically. I want to hear from them. I need advice. I need somebody to help me out here and fix the air conditioning or the heater or whatever. And if they don't get back to you, or they get back to you in 5 days, that's not good enough. And so you just have to be on top of these things.
Yeah, I'm trying to
Also,
think of who I need to get back to right now.
I'm sorry, you
No, I
think
said I'm
about who
thinking
you
of
need to get back
who,
to.
yeah, if
Yeah.
anybody. It's a great
Well,
exercise to think about. Has
you know
anybody
what?
slipped through the
It's
cracks?
much easier today because you can talk into your iPhone and say, call, Joe Smith on Wednesday at 9 o'clock, and it's done. So um, much easier today. Um, Also, my father was a production manager for a little girl's coat factory, and he was in charge of buying certain materials like thread, and cloth and things like that for the coats. Um, he always said to me that when salesmen would come in, he would never give them an order the first time around.
Mm.
And he said, but if they showed persistence, if they kept coming back after 3, 4 times, he would make sure to give them an order, even if it was just a small order, to see how they did. And that always stuck in my mind. So my experience with that was, I would go into someone's office the first time, and we'd have a decent conversation, but nothing earth shattering. Certainly didn't get an order. And I'd go back again. And maybe on the first call, they would say to me, well, I have a supplier and I'm happy with them. And I would say, well, that's great. I'm glad that you're happy with them, but maybe there are other things that I can do for you. Maybe there's something I can do for you. Maybe you want to consider me as a second supplier. Because who knows what might happen to your main supplier. There could be a fire, there could be a strike, there could be, who knows. So maybe it's a good idea to have a second guy that you can call on, that will come through for you. And that worked very well for me also.
How much effort does it take to build that client list, do you think, in the beginning of, or I guess going back in your autobiography, like in the beginning years of your building
Yeah,
that book early on, even,
yeah.
how many meetings, how much
It
energy into that?
it
Is it
really
a couple days a week?
it really depended on who I was seeing and what situation they were in. There were times when I would walk into a place and sit down with someone, and the first thing they would say is, I'm really glad you're here because I'm not very happy with my supplier. He was late on the order, or he sent me an order that was incorrect. There was a problem, whatever. And other times, I would see someone and they would say, I'm very happy with my supplier. And the second time they would tell me that again. And the third time they would tell me that again. And there were times when you just had to walk away. But that's another thing that you have to keep in mind with sales. And that's, you don't want to waste your time banging your head against the wall, unless it's an account that you really believe that you can be successful with, and I've developed, I guess, a sense over the years where I could feel
Hmm.
whether or not I was going to get along with this person, whether we could form a relationship, whether I could help them in some way, assist them with their packaging. I had an account that I called on for about 3 or 4 years. And this was when I was working for my last company. And every year in January, the owner of the company would sit down with the salespeople, and he would do that individually. We would go out to breakfast, and the sales guys had to present, not just guys but women also, had to present lists, your present customers, your prospective customers, and another category, and I don't remember the name of it, but it was like, people that you're calling on that you're not sure about. Okay. And I, every year for about 3 or 4 years, I'd have the same name on my list that I hadn't sold $1 in sales to. And the company was located in Waco, Texas,
Mm.
and I was in Philadelphia. This was for the transparent folding cartons, and at the time there weren't very many manufacturers, so you could sell them anywhere because people were looking for suppliers. I found this company in a store. I went in one day to a drugstore type of operation, and I saw a whole wall of plastic folding cartons, printed cartons. And I immediately looked at them, saw an address, Waco, Texas, name of the company. I contacted them. I called on them consistently because I knew that, number one, the cartons that I saw in the store were not of great quality. and I knew that we could do better.
Wow.
Secondly, I thought that the way that the carton was made, that they were adding expense to the operation. So the owner of the company that I worked for used to laugh and say to me at our meetings every year, "I can't believe you still have their name on here." And I kept saying to him, "I'm going to sell them. I know I'm going to sell them." I went through about 3 or 4 purchasing agents in that company.
Wow.
Never even had an appointment with any of them. They just shut me down. And finally, there was a guy that came in, and I called one day, and he said, "I was going through the files, and I see that over the years you've sent us samples of your company's work. You've sent letters. You have been trying to sell us for a number of years. Why don't you come down and see me?" And it became my biggest account. I did more business with them than any other customer, and I had them for years until they took the business to China, and that was the end of it. And he even the guy that I was dealing with even said to me at the time, "Why don't we're going to be taking the business to China? Why don't you go over to China and find a supplier for us, and you can continue to sell us?" I didn't do it because I was just not ready to do it on my own, and I lost the account. We're still friends. We're still friends to this day, and that's, I don't even know how many years. It's at least 20 years later.
Wow.
Yeah. The only problem with him is he's a Dallas Cowboys fan, and it's a little tough. But he did when the Eagles won the championship game. The first guy that I heard from was him, who congratulated me on my Eagles. So,
Wow, we just lost half the audience. I'm
oh well, I know we would lose you.
no, no, no. It's great. It's culture, right? Um,
I keep telling you that culture. Every time I watch a sports show,
yeah.
all that they talk about is the culture of the team. The
Really?
culture, no, all the time, and it has so much. It's so important. Winning teams have great culture. Losing teams have terrible culture,
Why do you think that is?
because it's more than just get it going out on the field and playing. The teams with the best culture have the team the teammates on the team spend time with each other, go out to dinner, they know each other's families, they support each other, they it's just a whole different deal. And the management treats the players as if they're the most important thing that they have going, and and it is.
Wow.
So yeah. So
What do you think is a big lesson in that 4 year pursuit? For
the
our
big
salespeople
lesson,
that are listening to this.
um, again, it was, I guess, an innate ability that I have to take a look at the situation and decide I can break through on this,
Hmm.
as opposed to, you know, so many times going into a company and after meeting with them a few times, just saying, "Hey, you know, if you need me, you have my card. If there's anything I can do for you, let me know," and I walk away, because time is so important in sales. You don't want to waste time on accounts that you're not going to get. You also don't want to waste time on a lot of real small accounts, because you can do the same amount of work with a big company as you do sometimes with a smaller company.
How did you psych yourself up to reach out to the bigger companies?
Well, I did that in my last position, and it was a great experience for me. Um, and it was also not a great experience for me, because one of the main reasons why I left, aside from feeling, that I was getting older and all of that, was that the owner of the company refused to take on certain accounts if they weren't big enough. And in my opinion, in sales, you need a mix. You need to have some small accounts, some medium size, some large. The reason for that is that if you have all large accounts and you lose one, it's going to hurt. And if you have the medium and small accounts, then it keeps you going. And while you're doing all that, you can call on a large account. A large account takes a much longer time to develop and to even get in the door, as opposed to a smaller account. So, I've sold large accounts. When I first started working at the company that I spent almost 20 years with, I was lucky enough to call RCA. They had a facility in Deptford, New Jersey at the time, no longer there, but I called. I got the purchasing guy on the phone. Lucky for me. I mean, it could have taken me a year, but he answered. He was willing to see me. I walked in, and we started a relationship. And the thing is, the interesting part about that, and that became one of my biggest accounts also. The interesting part of that is when you walk into someone's office and you start to talk to them, you should also be looking around their office. Look at their awards, look at their photos, look at their family photos, look at the kinds of books or magazines they may have in their office. And it sort of gives you an idea of where this person's coming from. I happen to be sitting across the desk from this purchasing agent, and above him were shelves with products. One of them happened to have a plastic folding carton that I saw was a sample carton from someone, because it had a sticker on it. And what happens is that when you make a sample, you put the name of the company on it. The name of your company is already on there, and you provide the sample. And if they like it, then they proceed to an order, if everything works out well. This guy had this on the shelf. And I said to him, one of the things that we manufacture are plastic folding cartons just like that. And he turned around and he took it and he said, "Oh, this." He said, "Yeah, we've been trying to figure out how to do this." And I'll tell you how long ago this was. It was called the VCR kit. And what it was at the time, back when VCRs first came out, they used to cover them. They used to have a cover for the dust. People would put a cover over the VCR. So this box, this sample, had a VCR cover, a VCR tape, and a head cleaner, which used to clean the heads of the VCR to make the picture better. And
VCR played
I'm
movies.
sorry.
Didn't the VCR play movies?
Yes, exactly.
The audience might not even.
Yeah. Well, the next generation was, I think, Bluetooth. I'm not Bluetooth.
Blu-ray.
Blu-ray. Yeah. But this was just the beginning. In fact, the first camera I had was like this big, and you'd hold it on your shoulder.
Well, we had David Bishop was one of the early on the show, Sony and MGM, talking about all of this recently.
Okay.
South Jersey guy, actually.
How about that?
Back when they did the tapes, they were ahead of the curve.
How about that?
The home video movement, if you remember that.
Well,
So they needed packaging for that.
Sure. Absolutely.
So that's
And
something
that's,
you would have to do with your company.
well, that's how I got my foot in the door. I said to him, I think that I can come up with a package for you. First I said to him, what's wrong with this? And he said, it's too flimsy. It doesn't hold up in the stores. And I said, well, I think I have a solution for you. So I gave him a, um, like the candy boxes, the Godiva chocolate
Yeah.
boxes. I gave him the base of a box, like a cardboard base, rigid box. It had an insert in there that held the three items. And I put a plastic lid on and I put a ribbon around it so it looked like a gift. And I
Wow.
brought it in. And this was the craziest thing. I brought it into him. We were sitting there and he was looking at it. And in came the director of marketing, who I didn't know, never met. And he walked in and he said, hi, my name is Scott. I said, I'm Jerry. And he said, what do you have here? And I said, well, I remade that sample because the big complaint was that it was not rigid enough in here. Try this. And he did this and he shook it and he turned it around and went like this. And he handed it back to the purchasing agent and he said, order 35,000 of these and we'll get the printing together.
Wow.
That was my first order.
What were you thinking?
I was thinking, how great am I? No, I was not thinking that. I was thinking how lucky I am. How lucky that he
Overwhelming.
happened to walk in. We became lifelong friends. We're still friends to this
Really?
day. Yeah. And that was 1980. No, 1989. Yeah. That was fantastic. Great
So,
experience.
so would you suggest our audience actually build, I, I guess it's implicit in this conversation, build long-standing friendships with your people.
You want to be, there are a lot of salespeople out there that just about make a living and they're happy doing it. I think that what separates the really, really, professional salespeople from the run-of-the-mill salesperson is that they're not satisfied with just making a salary. For most of my career, I worked on straight commission. So it was pretty much like my business anyway. The only problem when you work for someone is that you can have an account that you think is going to be a great account and they can turn around and say, I don't want it. I don't like it. So when I went into my own business, I made those decisions. And that's why it's worked so well for me.
What advice do you have for someone the first 3 years in their own business?
Um, learn the accounting system. It took me hours and hours to figure out QuickBooks, which I still use today. Um, but in the beginning, what now takes a minute probably took me 20 minutes.
Wow.
And I spent a lot of hours not only going out making sales calls, but coming back and trying to figure out, how am I going to do all this? So yeah, there's a lot of work in the beginning, but once you set it up and you feel comfortable with it, it's like anything else. You just start to roll.
How important is it for entrepreneurs listening to know their numbers?
Important, very important. Yeah. I mean, I, I always tell people, and it's very simplistic, is that I don't sell anything for less than what I pay for it. So
Why not?
I live by that. I live
Yeah.
by that rule.
To be able to make a living.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like common sense, but that actually is very profound because
I
how
mean, you
as
just
you
have, well, what that means really is you have to know what costs are involved with your product if you have your own business, because, you need to know what you should sell it for and give a customer a fair price and a competitive price.
and weigh all of those.
Sure.
You mentioned that your dad was working with these young girls' coats as a manager of the factory.
Yes, he was, excuse me, he was a production manager,
Production.
and it was for little girls' coats.
What do you would you say some of the value like core values that he modeled that made him good at that?
Um, well, first and foremost is he told me a story um, about when he first started. He went to work for a friend of his whose family had a factory, and he sort of moved up in the ranks very quickly because it was his friend. I'm sorry. Um, and and he said that he would walk up and down the aisles, and there would be people doing different operations. Like it was almost an assembly line type of situation where somebody would make the collars of the coat, somebody would make the sleeves, somebody would make the buttonholes, whatever. And he came across someone and he looked at their work and he said, "I don't like that. That's not right." And the person turned around to him and said, "Show me how to do it." And he couldn't do it. So he stayed after work for months learning every single operation. And by the time he was finished, he could sit down and show someone how to do whatever operation they were doing and do it well.
Wow.
So that was the most important thing. Second thing is how to deal with people. If you're a boss, and I have no employees, by the way. I'm a one person operation. If you have employees, as you know, I'm sure, and as the people who are watching know, that's probably one of the toughest things to deal with. Everybody has different personalities, different needs, different moods, and I think that's extremely important.
But there are many entrepreneurs that listen as well. They're thinking, no employees, that sounds like a dream. How are you managing
Yeah,
that? What advice? Because not everybody wants that type of business. So
I, you
how have you
know,
been able to do it solo and be a solopreneur? That's a movement that's growing now. I just listened
is
to
that
a
right?
video book. Yeah, because of technology and that the
Right,
statistics are growing at more solo businesses
right.
um, for a variety of reasons. So how have you been able to be that and be successful?
Well, I think one of the things that has helped me tremendously is the fact that I have vendors who manufacture the product. I don't manufacture. I don't have a truck. I don't have. I have my computer, my phone, and my car, and um, so uh, my vendors help me tremendously. If I need design work, they have designers um, that they allow me to deal with. Um, a lot of these vendors I give a fair amount of business to, so it makes sense because I'm a customer of theirs, just like any other customer. And if a customer needs a new design for a carton, they do it, and they don't usually charge, and they don't charge me. And it's also because if I come to them with a project, it's usually something that I know I'm going to get. I don't waste their time. It's not like
Mm.
I'm asking for samples all the time and then never bring them orders. Um, so that they have a whole support system for me. They have designers. They have sales service people that I deal with. So when I place the orders, I deal with the sales service people, and they get back to me, and they'll say, "Hey, if your customer orders 500 more cartons, we can give you a price break of X amount or whatever," and that helps tremendously.
Mm.
So I have a system around me, even though they're not my employees, and I also have someone that sells for me, but he's a 1099 guy. It doesn't work for me. So if he decides to bring me the business, then we work together, and that's been
Mm.
great. It's worked out well.
Yeah. How about mentorship throughout the career? Were there any, what's your take on it? Has that been
Yeah,
instrumental in your career,
yeah.
bosses or role
Hey,
models?
in my last business that I worked for, the sales guys were wonderful. They were all really good sales guys, and I learned a lot from them. The owner of the company, there were actually two. There were two partners, and they both had different skills, but they were both very, very smart and very accomplished. So I learned a lot from them. Um, you know, just for instance, the company that I used to work for paid their bills on time or early all the time.
Oh,
And when I went into business, I felt that that was something that was very important because I felt that there are too many people out there who delay paying their bills, and people in business need a cash flow. And I get upset when customers of mine pay me 10 days late. So I pay with if the terms are 30 days, I pay within 30 days. And I feel that I get better pricing, better service, and loyalty.
hmm.
So something else I would urge people to do.
Hmm. This has been great. I'm excited. Feel like part one, and we're back in sixth grade.
Back to sixth grade.
Yeah, teaching again.
Is that right? Well, I've never done anything like this, so I was a little anxious about it, but you're very good. You're very good interviewing.
Thanks. I look forward to your podcast and your journalism in the next couple of years.
Okay, you got it. Is that it? We're done?
Well, I do have one last. If you had, let's say a word for 2025, do you have a word
Wow,
for 2025? Or if you did, what would it be?
it's interesting. You need, well, I have more than a word. I would say you need to have a balance in your life. Um, and I tell you this all the time.
Amen.
Yeah. You have to recharge the batteries. You have to be able to separate work from personal life. Um, I have a friend that I know for many, many years. I met him when we were in eighth grade together,
Wow.
and years and years ago, probably when I was teaching, he used to say to me, there's nothing you can do for your business or your job when you're home eating dinner or lying in bed ready to go to sleep. You have to be able to detach that and come back strong the next day and feel, recharged, reinvigorate. So that's what I would recommend. Balance life, enjoy, have
If
fun.
you, well, back to the quote. Let's see here. Oh, I lost it. Learn what is to be taken seriously and laugh at the rest. Herman Hesse.
That's right.
Jerry, thanks for coming on the show. This was a blast. I look forward to next time. If you're listening to this episode, share this with a friend, especially they're in sales. They you hear them every time you go out to eat with them, they say they're going to start their business. Send this to them. And please leave us a review on the Culture Matters podcast. And we will see you next time. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thank you. It was a blast. I loved it.